Now, as it's international break, we thought we'd take a look at Manchester United from maybe a slightly different angle and see if we could get some sort of pointers for the future. Now, INEOS completed the takeover of French side Nice back in 2019, so 5 years on. What have they done? Doogie, let's come to you first of all. Tell us what state Nice were in when the takeover happened.
Well, in terms of a bit of Nice's history, they were they've been in Ligue 1 for a long, long time, but their peak was really in the 1950s when they won 4 league titles. Since then, they haven't won a single title. So when INEOS took over Nice, they were hoping to establish themselves back at the sharp end of not just Ligue 1, but regularly qualify for European football. That hasn't really materialised. It's been a real bit of a shame. Their highest finish has been 5th. They finished 9th twice. It really hasn't gone to plan in terms of slowly building them up into a European powerhouse. And given the fact that they took over a Patrick Vieira side that had finished 7th the previous year, that had finished in the top 4 twice in the previous 3 seasons, you'd have maybe hoped to have had higher league placings across their 5 years in charge.
Yeah, so have we seen any improvements since they've been there?
Well, not much progress. One step forward, one step back, really. If we look at their league positions over those 5 years, the first season with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford at the helm, they came in 6th, 41 points in 2019-20. And we can see then there's been a pattern of 9th, 5th, 9th, 5th. And look where they are this season, 9th, with 9 points on the board so far. So, as I say, one step forward, one step back. Qualifying for Europe in some of these seasons, but never qualifying for the Champions League. And we know how that can turbocharge teams in terms of finances. Not much in silverware either. They got to a quarter-finals of a Conference League season and they got to the final of the French Cup in 22, which they lost that final to Nantes. And really, there's not been too much to shout about. And I think the Nice fans are pretty frustrated about it.
They are, because there has been fan protests and supporters refusing to go to the stadium. So it's not been plain easy sailing for them, has it?
Yeah, the most notable incident came in May 2023 when Nice came in May with Toulouse and huge swathes of the crowd didn't turn up for that one. Dante, the club captain at the time, then actually publicly criticised INEOS as well. He said that they needed to work more in silence, that it's all very well and good, stating these objectives, but they needed to match it, and that he complained that there'd been so much turnover in the squad. And that's fair to say, because across the 5 seasons they've been there, they've averaged 9 players arriving each season and 14 players leaving each season. So there's just been a huge churn of players at the club and managers too. So there's just been a lack of stability for which to really build up into those stated ambitions of qualifying for the Champions League every year.
Yeah, the captain enraged. It was Dante's Inferno.
Very good.
What was going on there? Of course, most of the talk since the INEOS takeover of Manchester United has centred around the future of Erik ten Hag. They seem to be sticking with him for now. Do they show that sort of policy with Nice?
Well, Erik ten Hag might not like our next graphic because we can see that Nice, over those 5 seasons of INEOS being in charge, have got through 7 managers, whether they're caretakers or interims included as well. But 7 men have come into Nice and not really succeeded how INEOS would like them to. And they're managers with good calibre as well. Patrick Vieira, we know how highly rated he was. Obviously a fantastic playing career, but coming into his coaching career, there are big things expected of him. Christophe Gaultier, he'd won the league with Lille the season before joining Nice, and he only lasted 1 season there. Lucien Favre, we know, has been at Borussia Dortmund. Farioli's gone on to have success at Ajax. They're doing well this season under his management. So, yeah, it's been a case of a lot of managers coming in and going, and none of them really hitting the spot for Nice, or none of them really delivering for Nice, which, is a concern. So none of these managers lasting a full 2 seasons under INEOS's ownership.
Yeah, we've certainly seen backing for Erik ten Hag this summer. Is that something we can expect to continue based on how they have spent at Nice as far as transfers is concerned?
Well, I think the first thing to say is it's a slightly different level in terms of the amount of money that's been spent. Remember, Erik ten Hag has had £600 million plus spent in the transfer market by Man United on players that he wants to bring to the club. When we look at Nice, though, Sir Jim Ratcliffe certainly has invested regularly. You can see this is their net spend since he's been owner of the club, and we can see apart from the year where obviously COVID was taking a big toll, and this summer where they made a small profit, INEOS have been spending, this is £110 million net in the red, basically. So they have backed these managers they've brought in, and as Doogie says, there's been a high turnover of players, and they've spent money on those players to bring them into the club. And in our next graphic, we can see how that breakdown has gone over the seasons. Particularly in 22-23, they splashed out. Terem Moffi, they signed a striker for over £20 million. That was one of their bigger outlays, and he went on to be their top scorer the following season. So maybe that one paid off. But I think that churn of players, that overturn of players, and the amount of money that's been spent, you're probably saying they're not getting the rewards for the investments they've made. But steady investment, but obviously it's going to be on a much bigger scale at Man United over the coming transfer windows.
Yeah, Doogie, has there been a change in tactics in terms of those signings? Remind us some of the names to go there in this time and the transfer policy currently.
Yeah, well, like any club in Liga that doesn't qualify for the Champions League regularly, they often have to sell their best players in order to keep the project moving, in order to invest in their young stars, etc. And you've seen the likes of Mario Lemina leave, you've seen Alan Saint-Maximin leave. There's been a number of stars, Calvin Stengs, Kasper Dolberg have all been sold, who've all excelled for Nice at various points during the INEOS period, let's say. Kefren Turam left for Juventus this summer. That was a big blow for them. So they've definitely lost stars every summer, which is probably something that Man United won't have to deal with in the same way, partly because the team is underperforming so drastically at the moment that who would really want to buy too many players from Man United at the moment? They've tried to target young, hungry players. There's been a huge turnover. Terem Moffi, as Pete mentioned, was a real star, expected to really shine there. Jeremy Boga as well. They've targeted exciting young players and also taken some risks on players whose stars may be fallen, you know. Tanguy and Dembele going there this summer. They've had a spell with Aaron Ramsey, Kasper Schmeichel, Nicola Pepe. So they've targeted young, hungry players and also sort of rolled the dice a little bit with players that need another chance. And in the case of Ramsey, Schmeichel and Nicola Pepe, that really didn't work out whatsoever at the club. Tanguy and Dembele started much better there. But as Pete showed in that graphic earlier, their league position is still really disappointing at the moment.
Let's go to Manchester United, shall we? Erik ten Hag, he's confident he still has the backing of the owners. How much has that surprised you?
I mean, I said that at the weekend. I felt as if he would, I thought he would still be in charge, no matter what the result was, because, you just get the feeling that, I mean, are Manchester United waiting on something to happen, someone to say, right, OK, I've had my rest period now. Are they still being employed or still being paid by other clubs? Because, I mean, this can't continue. And I don't care what MD says. There's people there that will say that there's progression. There's not progression. There's none of it. I can't see. The fact that Manchester United have scored 5 goals this season tells me all I need to know. A team that was built on success, was brought up in success, and the team that I watched in the 90s and even before that, scoring goals, winning games of football. I mean, it's a pale shadow of that resemblance right now, because, and you do feel sorry for Manchester United fans, because in the 90s and so forth, they were the elite club in terms of off the pitch and on it. Right now, it just seems to be all over the place. But I think it's easy for, the owners are not going to come out right now and say that, the manager's going to lose his job or whatever until they've got someone there. I get that. But it's going to get to the stage where it's probably going to look bad in them, that they can't make a decision as well, because, I mean, anybody can see that this is heading in the wrong direction for Manchester United. And, Erik ten Hag is not going to come out and say, yeah, we're really struggling. You only need to look at the team selections, you need to look at the results, the performances and the results, and they are a million miles away from where Manchester United need to be.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday they had their ownership meeting. It again raised those questions that you were asking there. There were reports Thomas Tuchel had been approached. We've heard that's not the case. But even so, for Ten Hag, all this noise around his job, it must be very off-putting.
Well, he might not have been approached in the last few days, but there is no doubt that Manchester United spoke to managers in the summer. Whether Thomas Tuchel was one of them back then, we don't know. But there is one thing that they definitely spoke to managers, and again couldn't come to a decision on what to do. But for me, I look at Erik ten Hag, and you're not going to walk away from a job. And yes, they might turn around and give you a new contract. For me, the contract doesn't really mean anything, because the termination clause will still be the same. It's more or less we're backing our manager, but you then strip him of his staff. They're cleared out. You look at the staff that's left; they're having a pop. There's players within the dressing room. Christian Eriksen's having a pop in terms of some of the players. Ruud van Nistelrooy looks more hands-on when you see things like that there. He's been a manager before. Whatever you say, it isn't rosy at Manchester United right now, and everybody's going to play the card of we're getting better. Things are improving. The proof's in the pudding. That it's nowhere near the level where Manchester United need to be.
No, and I want to pick up on the other stat you quite wisely researched and dropped in there. Only scored 5 Premier League goals this season. Only one of those goals has come from Marcus Rashford. Yep, he scored in the EFL Cup and the Europa League. What are you saying? Because we know he can score goals, as he proved a couple of seasons ago. So what are you seeing as a former forward yourself?
I've just seen a team that's not. I mean, they might be creating some opportunities, but the fact that Rob, we speak there about they've scored 5 goals, and rightly so. 3 of them came against Southampton. So there's been games where Manchester United have even looked like scoring. And Marcus Rashford, I mean, everybody, he's someone that I think that even Manchester United fans, not Manchester United fans, want to do. They want him to do well because of what he done for a lot of people. When people were struggling, a lot of kids and everything around Manchester, the job that he done then, people want him to do well. And I think when you go back to that period of time there where he'd scored at Southampton, then obviously get the brace against Barnsley in the cup, and everybody's thinking, right, here we go, he's going back in a run. But the reality is, the team, whatever way it's functioning, isn't allowing the forward areas, it isn't allowed the forward players to thrive. Defensively, yeah, they seem sound enough. I think you can't criticise them we can't sit here and criticise them for only scoring 5 goals, but at the same time, only Liverpool, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, and Arsenal have conceded less in the Premier League. So, I mean, defensively, they do seem to be doing a job there. But is that having a harm on an impact on them going forward? I think it is. And I'll go back to it again. Manchester United fans were brought up way before our time, or way before my time. I'm not sure about yours, Rob, but watching the team free-flowing football, attacking the wide areas, getting balls in the box, scoring goals. It's nowhere near that.
Manchester United's plans to part ways with their manager remain unchanged. Erik ten Hag is still in charge, but the uncertainty around his future continues to build during the international break in October. Even if Ten Hag walks into the Jimmy Murphy Centre for the pre-match press conference next Thursday, it won't mean he's out of the woods yet. Ten Hag has been through tough times before. He's experienced and savvy enough to understand how football clubs operate. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer knew his time was up before his last match even ended. Jose Mourinho could read the writing on the wall too. The only exceptions at United were Louis van Gaal, who remained in denial until the very end, and David Moyes, who also couldn't see the end coming. Moyes was dismissed on Easter Monday 2014 after rumours of his sacking leaked. He spent that day trying to finalise a move for Luke Shaw. The decision to fire him came as a shock to both Moyes and the United faithful, as it had been 27 years since the club had dismissed a manager mid-season. A new standard was set with Moyes and Van Gaal. Failing to make the top 4 and qualify for the Champions League became the line in the sand. Both fell short and paid the price. Solskjaer agreed to become interim manager 8 weeks before touching down in Manchester, and Mourinho, always in the loop, knew of Woodward's manoeuvres well in advance. Timing is critical for United's current regime, and right now, they have time. There's a 10-day gap before their next match, with players and staff scattered globally, training set to resume next week. The idea that a manager has 2 games to save his job is nonsense, a senior club figure said this week. The club's measured response to the draws with Porto and Aston Villa reflects this. Yet, international breaks have proven to be pivotal for managerial sackings. Mauricio Pochettino was let go by Tottenham just days before the resumption of their domestic campaign. Liverpool acted decisively when they sacked Brendan Rodgers just hours after a Merseyside derby draw in October 2015, making way for Jurgen Klopp. United isn't as sure about Ten Hag's replacement. Thomas Tuchel is admired, especially by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and he's readily available. Other managers currently employed are also on their radar. However, in the INEOS era, United might need to compromise on their philosophy. Appointing a long-term manager without instant Champions League results risks a second consecutive season out of Europe's elite competition, something that hasn't happened since 1993. Woodward chose Mourinho because he guaranteed quick results. In his first season, United lifted 2 trophies and qualified for the Champions League in a euphoric fashion just days after the Manchester Arena attack. Mourinho had been in discussions months before Van Gaal was finally let go in May 2016. Similarly, Woodward initiated talks with Van Gaal after an 11-day gap between Moyes' penultimate and final matches in 2014. Moyes' position weakened after the Olympiacos debacle in February, worsened by 2 3-0 home defeats and Champions League elimination. United were caught off guard by Solskjaer's decline. After giving him a 3-year contract in July 2021, they had no backup plan when Liverpool dismantled them 5-0 in October. CEO Richard Arnold and other club leaders knew after that loss that Solskjaer's time was up, but they needed time to figure out the next steps. United endured 2 more crushing defeats before Solskjaer filmed his farewell interview. Ill-prepared, the club turned to a caretaker manager, followed by an interim. Ten Hag joked in June that United had thrown a wrench in the works by cutting short his holiday plans. In hindsight, staying on may have only delayed the inevitable. Ten Hag and INEOS seem an uneasy match. If they don't want me, I'll go somewhere else and win trophies, because that's what I do, Ten Hag boasted after the FA Cup final. He's ready for the bullet. But United might have missed their shot.